Okay, Corey.
Good afternoon and welcome to the latest Milwaukee Press Club virtual newsmaker. I'm your host, Milwaukee Press Club President Corey Hess from Wisconsin Public Radio. Today we have Missy Hughes, Secretary of the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. But first, I would like to thank our sponsors. Our presenting sponsor is Spectrum News One. Our event partner is WISPolitics.com. WISPolitics.com partners with the Press Club for this luncheon as part of its ongoing event series in Milwaukee. Sponsored by UW Milwaukee, the Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at Pabst, Milwaukee Police Association, the Firm Consulting, Medical College of Wisconsin, and Spectrum. Once again, today we have Missy Hughes. Missy has led WEDC since October 2019. The organization helps lead economic development efforts in the state by providing small businesses with grants and providing performance-based tax credits to companies that meet hiring and capital goals. Missy was appointed by Governor Tony Evers. She assumed the role after the state legislature approved the $3 billion contract with Foxconn. One of her many jobs is to continue to oversee that deal on behalf of the state. Missy, thanks for joining us today.
Missy, we can't hear you.
Sorry. Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Corey, for introducing me and for having me here today. I thought that maybe what I would do just for a couple minutes is level set about where WEDC is as we enter into 2021. Obviously, you can't even begin to describe 2020, but for WEDC, 2020 was an incredible year, and we had so many different things going on, including our regular work. So just to give you a flavor of what we worked on, we were part of deploying over $240 million to over 50,000 businesses in Wisconsin. So in a regular year, WEDC has about 300 awards that we give to businesses throughout the course of our fiscal year. And by, between March and the end of June, which is the end of our fiscal year, we had given away over 30,000 awards. So it was really an incredible effort to stand up a system, reach out to our businesses and get funds deployed. And we continued that through the rest of the year. We also provided a lot of guidance to businesses over the course of the year, guidance on how to reopen their business following the safer at home order, and then just to continue to help navigate the challenges with employees or how to take care of your customers, thinking about the different resources that are available. We really tried to be a trusted source for our businesses. We launched a campaign that continues today called We're All In, and this is, we're all in this together. And at first we were talking about the need to really pair public health with economic health. If we wanted our economy to get restarted, we wanted to make sure everybody was acting safely and taking care of each other. And that's what we do well in Wisconsin. We take care of our neighbors, we take care of our communities. We pivoted that towards the end of the year to really focus on shopping local. Over the course of COVID, we had habits that we created, shopping online with big retailers to get what we needed for our families. It was really important that we remembered that our local businesses are the fabric of our economy and the fabric of Wisconsin. And so we launched the Main Street Marketplace, and by the end of the year, we had over 400 businesses that were able to be accessed online. So you could shop local from anywhere in Wisconsin. And then the final thing, just with regard to COVID that I'll mention, is in the end of June, we published the Wisconsin Tomorrow report. And that report was really at the request of the legislature. We talked about the impact of COVID. Back in the day, we thought we would be mostly through this crisis. At the end of June, we find ourselves in January still getting through it, but we were able to, I think, provide some context to what was happening in Wisconsin, both to our industries, but also to our communities and to our people of Wisconsin. A couple other things that we did in 2020 include the standing up of the Blue Ribbon Commission for Rural Prosperity and the Office of Rural Prosperity at WEDC. That was announced in the governor's State of the State last year, and we're excited that the Blue Ribbon Commission just published their report. And after just a few months worth of work, but they're ready to keep working and they're excited, and I'm really proud of the work that the commission has done. We've also really, most importantly, turned a very large amount of our focus to the economic inequity challenge that Wisconsin faces with our communities of color. And it has not been something that has been a focus, and it needs to be, and we are making that a focus now of our regular work as we go forward. And, our regular work has continued through all of this. Corey, you mentioned, our role in attracting businesses and retaining businesses, helping them grow, also helping communities. So that has all been part of the work of WEDC in 2020. Corey, you also mentioned Foxconn, and obviously that's a big project for WEDC. It has taken a lot of energy over the last few years. And I want you to know that at WEDC, our practice is not to comment on current conversations we're having with businesses. You can imagine a business that's thinking about relocating to Wisconsin and wants to have those conversations confidential. And so we have a practice of when we're in conversation with businesses, we don't talk about the status of those conversations or the details. So for today, I'm going to let you all know with your questions, I'm not going to be able to comment on the current status of Foxconn or those conversations. And so I just wanted to let you know about that. But I'm excited to talk about what WEDC is doing. We spend a lot of time talking about Foxconn, but I also really want to be able to share with you the information about our other work. I just want to end by saying, as we head into 21 at WEDC, we're really thinking about the lessons that we've learned about Wisconsin's economy. And during this pandemic, we've learned that if you want to be an active participant in the economy, you need to be able to have a place where your child goes for childcare that is affordable and quality, so that you can be part of your workplace during the day and not worrying about whether or not your child is safe. If your health is compromised and you don't have access to quality and affordable healthcare, it is going to be really hard to participate fully in the economy. And finally, broadband continues to be an incredibly important issue and has become even more important with the pandemic. If you want to participate in the economy, you can't do it. If you can't work remotely, if your schooling isn't able to be done remotely, that really challenges it. So broadband is incredibly important. All of these issues, childcare, healthcare, housing, broadband, are all amplified if you are a business of color, a community of color, or a person of color. And we have really seen in the course of the last year with clarity that distortion, and we need to act on that. But I want to just finally say we've also learned some really positive things, and I think most of you have probably talked with me now to see that I try to be a really positive person. And what we've seen in the last year is pretty incredible as far as our ability to pivot and change on a dime. We all of a sudden had to school remotely. We had to work remotely. If someone had said on February 1st, hey, in 2 months, we're going to be working all remotely and we're going to be schooling remotely, people would have been like, oh no, we're not going to be able to do that. But we did it. We stood up systems that were able to deliver testing, and we're standing up systems right now to deliver vaccines. We have innovated. We've seen our businesses really innovate in the last year, and we need to capture that culture of innovation that our businesses demonstrated and take that into the future. And finally, at WEDC, we have demonstrated that the flexibility that is part of our structure is really critical. We were able to shift and access and help small businesses, and we're going to keep thinking about that muscle, that superpower that we have of flexibility, and how we can use that in the coming period. So those are my just opening remarks, and I look forward to our discussion.
Well, thank you very much. Let me introduce our panel of journalists. We have Stephanie Hoff from WIS Business and WIS Politics, Ricardo Torres from the Journal Sentinel, and Nick Williams from the Milwaukee Business Journal. So I will let them get started. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. And I'm excited to kick off the panel and ask Secretary Hughes some questions that are also on the mind of other Wisconsinites. And I do want to start out with Foxconn. I know you said you don't want to, you can't get into the details of how negotiations are going right now. But I'm curious as to just your own feelings about this. Are you optimistic on a new deal with Foxconn? And any idea of what a timeline could be for a new contract to come out?
I am optimistic. As I said in my opening remarks, I'm an optimistic person. And coming into this role, I understood that Foxconn was going to be a big project for me. And I also really felt strongly that we needed to find a solution that worked for the Wisconsin taxpayers and works for the company. And so, as we work on Foxconn, that continues to be the guiding principle at WEDC and for the governor to find a solution. And, these things take time, and it's going to unfold on the timeline that it's going to unfold on. And so I'm not sure I can really identify, a date, but my team does know that I'm pushing hard, but I like action, so.
And I have one follow-up before I hand it over to Ricardo. So Foxconn was a massive project that was expected to transform the regional economy, but that hasn't happened. So looking at Foxconn now, is there still an opportunity to have an impact on southeastern Wisconsin with that same anticipated ripple effect?
Well, I think it's really important to keep in mind that southeastern Wisconsin is a powerhouse unto itself. And the economic activity that we're seeing in southeastern Wisconsin right now is very, very, very impressive. And I think I don't even want to say the number that I heard about the economic development activity that's happening there, because I might get it wrong by exponentially, but it is really exploding in southeast Wisconsin. I think a lot of that has to do with the attention given to the I-94 corridor. I think it has to do with the fantastic location that is there. Foxconn will be able to add to that, and we anticipate that growth will continue, and we continue to work with the communities there and the businesses there to make sure we're doing everything we can to help them grow.
All right, Ricardo, it's all you.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Secretary Hughes, for talking with us and spending some time to talk with us. To stay on the Foxconn topic, one of the points of discussion has been some ambiguity with what they're doing there. And so I was wondering if you could just lay out in some more detail as to where this project is in terms of like what they're planning on doing.
Yeah, I think out of respect for Foxconn, it's their role to articulate what they're doing. And, as I said, we're in conversations with them, but the details and the status of those conversations, I really want to respect that process, not only for Foxconn, but also for other businesses that might be thinking about coming to Wisconsin or doing projects with WEDC. I want them to know that those conversations are conversations between WEDC and the company, and when the time comes, those things become public.
Without going into further detail then, do you feel confident that you and your department have a better handle as to what is happening there?
I feel that our conversations with Foxconn have always been good conversations. We have had many conversations with them. Those conversations continue. And I believe, again, that I'm optimistic at the end of the day, they'll be fruitful conversations.
All right, I'm going to hand it off to Nick.
All right, Nick, you get one Foxconn question.
Hi, Missy. Thanks for taking our questions today. My
or
first
none,
question.
that's okay too.
Actually, my first question isn't about Foxconn. It's really about just what the pandemic has forced corporations around the globe to do, and that is have workers working remotely.
Mm-hmm.
So as corporations begin to see how their employees can work from anywhere and still be productive at a high rate, how can Wisconsin use this in terms of attracting talented people to the state and convincing outside companies to hire Wisconsin's talent? Thank you.
It's a great question, Nick. And, I think that as we headed pre-pandemic, January, February, there was a sense that rural Wisconsin was a dying breed. And this pandemic has given us collectively as Wisconsinites the opportunity to say, as a whole state, we have so much to offer. And making sure that our rural communities have a chance to take advantage of this moment of working remotely is, I think, really important. And recognizing that the work ethic of our Wisconsinites is something that, bar none, we have that to offer to companies that are considering moving here. We have what I've learned, a very safe environment for doing manufacturing. We are fortunately not subject to hurricanes and earthquakes and things like that. So if you need to mitigate your risk, we have an opportunity for that. So I think there's so much to offer in Wisconsin. We have some work to do to make sure that we have housing for those workers, to make sure that we have broadband availability and, just the basics that you need in a community like childcare and healthcare. I mentioned those things. So in order to really attract and retain businesses, we have to have a full picture of what we need to provide the workforce so that when those folks show up, whether it's virtually or in person, they're ready to demonstrate that Wisconsin work ethic.
Thanks, and I'll hand it back to you, Stephanie.
Thank you. And I want to shift to Wisconsin's pandemic economy. So, Secretary Hughes, how many Wisconsin businesses do you think will fail for good as a result of the pandemic? And in what sector are you seeing most of this happening in?
One of the most interesting experiences I had in the pandemic was trying to ascertain what was happening to businesses in real time. Our economic data is often data that is backward looking, right? You compare year over year. And so when you're looking at April's data and you're trying to compare it to April of 2019's data, it's apples and oranges. And so what we did at WEDC was to really try to get real-time data about what was happening with the businesses. And we did that by looking at, are businesses having credit card transactions? Are they, what are the banks saying about their businesses? And because otherwise, some of these businesses were just kind of going off into the ether. And we weren't really able to determine, had they gone out of business? Were they just, closing because their revenue was so low, it didn't make sense? So as we come out of the pandemic into, the moment of having more folks vaccinated, we're going to really start to, I think, be able to ascertain how many businesses have actually not survived. And, unfortunately, I do think it's going to be a significant number. And I think we're really going to see it in the hospitality industry, the tourism industry, the restaurant industry. And with the pandemic continuing into the winter months, it's going to make it even harder for those businesses. I think we're still assessing that. In my conversations with businesses, every conversation I had with a Main Street business or a small business said, Missy, we've had this go wrong, we've had this go wrong, we've had this go wrong, but we're going to be okay. And so I'm not counting out any Wisconsin businesses at this point, but we need to continue to look at that data. As we deployed the We're All In grants in phase 2 and phase 3, we worked really closely with the Department of Revenue to determine on a sales tax basis where we saw impact. So where we saw businesses that weren't, really down in paying sales tax, we knew those were the ones that needed that grant assistance, and that's where we deployed those funds. So we're going to need to continue to dive into the data and to really determine which businesses we've lost.
So as you said, with the hospitality industry kind of in the most trouble, where do you see a need for government intervention? And maybe it's in the form of more grants, or maybe it's in the governor's budget.
All along, we've really felt that the best source of resources to help businesses recover is from the federal government. And I'm very encouraged that we have a second round of stimulus happening right now. And we'll be working to make sure that the businesses are accessing PPP. I think that just reopened yesterday, so making sure that our businesses understand the opportunity to access PPP. And we're going to continue having conversations with our federal delegation and thinking about, as we move from relief, which was really what the first round of CARES Act was, to recovery. What does it look like to deploy those dollars in a way that leverages them and keeps them working for Wisconsin's businesses and Wisconsin's communities?
All right, Ricardo.
All right, I apologized because I do want to shift the conversation back to Foxconn, at least for my portion in this time. Is there any talk or any discussion from your office, Secretary, on new legislation that might need to be passed in order to reframe the tax incentive package? And if so, has there been, I'm sure the governor is involved, but how involved is the Republican leadership in the legislature?
I have not been involved in any conversations about new legislation around Foxconn.
Has there been any talk on how the WEDC could help Mount Pleasant and Racine County, who have borrowed a lot of money to help get this project going?
Certainly we have continued to have conversations with Mount Pleasant and Racine, and we want to make sure that as all of this comes together, we've done everything that we can to assure their long-term success in this also. They're critical components and stakeholders in this, and we have our conversations with any stakeholders we're talking to about this with them in mind.
All right, I'll give you a break from talking about Foxconn. So Nick, I'm handing it off to you.
Thanks, Ricardo. Missy, in terms of talking about WEDC's pipeline of projects, I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about some of the business that you may be attracting, how that plays into certain regions' workforce. So biotech companies wanting to move into Madison for biotech, or financial services and insurance in Milwaukee, or shipping and logistics maybe in Green Bay. And second part of that, is there potential for a HQ1 or even an HQ2 coming into Wisconsin? Is that something on the agency's plate? Thanks.
So Nick, I'm gonna challenge you back a little bit. I'm not quite sure what your first question was about, whether, where about the pipeline.
Right. So in terms of playing into a region's strength in the state, are you trying to attract companies that might want to be part of Madison's biotech ecosystem, or Milwaukee's fintech and insurtech ecosystem? That's kind of what I was asking.
Yeah. So each of the regions has a regional economic development organization, and those regions know their strengths and play to their strengths. So if you mentioned the New North region is focused on what kind of manufacturers can they bring in, what kind of paper companies can come in, what's the opportunities there. Same for Madison, same for Milwaukee. So WEDC's role is to work with those regions and understand what kind of businesses are you interested in attracting. If they come in through our pipeline, then we work with the region to help them attract that business. But we're also working with all the other regions in the state, whether it's the Momentum West in Eau Claire or out here in La Crosse, to make sure that those regions have the opportunity to attract businesses, because those large anchor businesses are so beneficial to the regions. And so it's critical that we're not just focused on the three regions that we often think about as kind of the powerhouse of the economy, that we're making sure there's opportunities in the rest of the state.
In terms of a second part of that question, like a large company relocating their headquarters to Wisconsin, or even like a second headquarter location, is that something in the pipeline, something that works, or something that we could see soon?
We talk with many different companies about the opportunities there. One of the things that continues to be a challenge, not only for companies that are considering moving, but for Wisconsin's own companies, is workforce. And so we need to be thinking about what kind of workforce can we present to a company that's interested in moving here. So if it's a fintech headquarters, can we make sure that we have done the work at our university system or our tech colleges to be able to provide that workforce? And I think, as we come out of the pandemic, we have an incredible opportunity to look and see who's on the sidelines in Wisconsin. Are they on the sidelines because of childcare? Are they on the sidelines because they don't have the skills? Are they on the sidelines because they just came out of incarceration? Let's bring those folks into the workforce, because then we can present them to a company that's thinking about moving their headquarters here and make sure that they understand we have the workforce, again, with the work ethic that is going to make them successful.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. Back to you.
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Nick. So, Secretary Hughes, you highlighted the We're All In program in your opening remarks. And those programs and campaign is WEDC's largest response to this pandemic, I feel. It encompasses the grant program, a social media campaign, and that platform aimed at boosting Main Street businesses. So all of this is, in the name of economic prosperity during the pandemic, but is it working? And do you have any statistics to share with us or anecdotal feedback?
I think it's been a real challenge to understand what we can do and how much do businesses need. So when we did the We're All In phase 1, that was a $2,500 grant to businesses with $1 million or less dollars worth of annual revenue. We knew that $2,500 was a drop in the bucket, but it was done with the intention of, is there a way to help a business if they need to buy some PPE, if they need to buy some inventory and to reopen their doors? Can we help with them? As we headed into phase 2, we increased that amount to $5,000, again, with the intention of trying to provide a lifeline until the businesses are able to get their revenue back up and running. And we heard from businesses on both sides of the fence. We heard from businesses, thank you, this has saved my business. Literally, people were saying $2,500 saved their business. And then we heard the same for $5,000. We also heard from businesses, okay, that's not going to do it. $5,000 is not going to do it for me, but we tried to really think about those businesses that didn't necessarily have a safety net headed into the pandemic, businesses that were unbanked or underbanked, businesses that had used their family savings in order to get started. We were trying to find those businesses where the safety net was really a challenge. And as we headed into phase 3, that was grants of $20,000 to restaurants, primarily between $1 million in revenue and $7 million in revenue. This was in response to conversations that we had and information we had about restaurants really struggling. And especially, in that moment of November, December, January, the dark months of the year when outdoor dining was disappearing. And they're, really feeling like they weren't going to be able to make it through to the next moment of springtime or February, or the winter tourism industry. And so our hope was that $20,000 would help get them through that period, help them keep a couple of those employees that they might have otherwise laid off. Resoundingly, businesses that I have talked to are heartbroken about having to lay off any employees. They've done everything they can to keep their employees on. And so we, trying to reach in and help there.
All right, Ricardo.
All right, Secretary Hughes, another Foxconn question for you. This project is unique in the sense that it's a local project, but it has connections to the White House. The Trump administration has been involved with and been very vocal on this project. And so I'm just wondering, from the WEDC's perspective, how does a Joe Biden administration change things, if at all?
as I've approached working with Foxconn and understanding the challenges, I've tried to control what I can control. And conversations at the very highest of the federal level between Foxconn and the federal government, the president, that is clearly above my pay grade, and therefore I've looked at the contract that Foxconn entered into, the relationship with Wisconsin, and worked to make that as beneficial as we can. As far as the new administration goes, let's get there, and then if there are opinions or thoughts or opportunities, I look forward to exploring those.
All right, Nick, I'm handing it to you.
Missy, I think you mentioned this in your opening remarks, talking about the prosperity gap that we have in Wisconsin. What is WEDC doing right now to close those gaps of, salary and resources that are in the state's Black and Brown communities? Thanks.
Well, I think the first thing that we're doing is understanding where we are helping and where we are an obstacle. Have we unintentionally created difficulty accessing resources? Have we created programs that just don't really work for businesses that are oftentimes smaller or don't have employees, or a tax credit doesn't really help them with what they need? So we're doing a deep dive looking at all of our programs to understand, are we helping? Are there places where we're actually creating more challenges and more situations where we're not doing that? We're not doing something to help solve it. We're consciously looking at the opportunities we have to help communities and businesses of color. I've had the chance recently to go to Milwaukee for the opening of the Upstart Kitchen, which is in the Sherman Phoenix area. It's a fantastic certified kitchen that entrepreneurs who are wanting to provide beautiful food to their neighborhood are able to do that, and we're so excited. That was a $50,000 grant a few years ago that has slowly turned into this beautiful thing. We need to find more opportunities to do projects like that, and that also means that we're consciously making sure that we're expanding our network of who we're talking to. Even my calendar, I'm making an effort to make sure that it is full of conversations with new partners, new organizations that are working in communities of color, so that we're making sure they know they have access to our resources, and I'm also learning what they need, and really to just come up with ideas and not have that be a feedback loop where you're understanding, are those things that are working? That's not going to work. So we're doing, Nick, I think what I think is the right first step, which is looking at ourselves, and then we will continue to talk with others, and we're finding out what others are doing. The last thing I'll say that I think is incredibly important is measuring. And we're making sure that we're starting, because we haven't been measuring how many businesses of color we're working with, how many dollars we're deploying to low and just low economic and distressed communities. Because I think, by measuring, you can tell whether or not you're doing better. If you don't measure, you're just flying blind.
Thanks, Missy. Back to you, Stephanie.
All right. So in the last state budget, the governor wanted to cap credits for the agricultural and manufacturing sectors. It didn't go through. And with the current state of our economy, should the governor be revisiting those caps for those sectors again this time around?
I think it's really important that in this moment, everything is on the table, and we need to be looking at our tax credits. We need to be looking at our incentive programs to determine, are they bringing us the rate of return and the opportunity for success that we thought they would? We need to be evaluating these programs. We need to be constantly going back and looking at those things. Now, in order to do that, you need to be able to have good conversations and be willing to be introspective or retrospective. And so I hope that, as we come out of the pandemic, as we've all collectively learned lessons, we will use that opportunity to say, okay, let's think about what's best for Wisconsin. And at WEDC, we're looking at those programs. We're trying to find the data that will help us determine whether or not they are useful programs. And we're at a point now of maturity at WEDC where we have the ability to look back over a few years worth of grants and awards in many different ways and say, okay, how collectively are those working for the state? Are they collectively bringing value and a return on investment for our taxpayers?
All right, Ricardo, I'm handing it to you now.
All right, here's your Foxconn question for this round. So the Department of Administration, for its budget request, stated that they don't anticipate Foxconn getting tax credits for the next 3 fiscal years. And the DOA has suggested that the facility down there is more for demonstration purposes. I was wondering if you agree with those assessments.
The assessment by the DOA for the budget was made based on WEDC's determination that Foxconn was ineligible for credits under the current contract. And so that, the DOA has the responsibility of looking forward and helping to plan the budget upcoming. And so that's, their role. And it is based on the information that we have at this time. And so, I think it's a logical conclusion to where WEDC has landed with the contract. And I think it is not speaking to whether or not we have a new status with Foxconn going forward.
All right, Nick, take it away.
All right. Stephanie asked this question earlier regarding, I think, some of that grant money and some of the businesses that might permanently close because of the pandemic. And while some of those dollars went to companies who were trying to survive, there were also a lot of companies in Wisconsin that were thriving during the pandemic just because of the products or services that they offered. So my question to you is, for the companies that were thriving and saw a lot of growth, what is WEDC going to do to keep those companies here? Because now they've grown and they're looking for probably more talent, they're looking for more space, they might look elsewhere. We've seen some companies that were fast growing that left for the coast or went down south. So my question is, what can WEDC offer to keep those companies that are thriving in the state? Thanks.
Well, I think, and it's a really good point that as my conversations continued throughout the year with manufacturers and other businesses, some of them were killing it. And that is, I think a testament to the fact that in Wisconsin, especially our manufacturers, our paper industry are providing really practical products and actual products to the rest of the country, sometimes, internationally. And so we saw the ability of those businesses to really be successful. And as we go back, those businesses are often the anchor and core backbone of Wisconsin's economy. And so what I want to do is, rather than being necessarily fearful that they're going to leave, I want to make sure that we're providing them and having good conversations with them about what they need in order to continue to thrive. And that does come back to things like workforce and making sure that the communities have the quality of life that will help them attract workers. If they're bringing somebody from out of state, they want to make sure, hey, these folks, if I'm bringing in somebody from Procter & Gamble or somebody from, another successful company, they're going to want to have a good place to live. They're going to want to have a place where their kids are either in childcare or have great schools. And so that's why it's really critical for WEDC to be working with the other parts of the administration. And we've been really working hard with other agencies so that we have these kind of cross conversations. And I'm saying to the Department of Children and Family Services, what are you guys doing for childcare? Because my businesses need childcare. And the DCF is saying to me, can we talk to businesses about the importance of childcare? And it's so critical. I had a conversation with a CEO of one of our best companies, and he said, we have to have childcare. If women are leaving the workforce, our businesses aren't going to grow. And so this is, there's a direct connection here that we need to make sure that businesses that want to grow continue to have access to workforce. I'm going to say, especially access to women in the workforce and people of color in the workforce, because diversity is key to a business's success. So we at WEDC need to make sure that the businesses have what they need. The last thing I'll say, sorry for the long answer, is for our startup businesses, for our entrepreneurs, we need to make sure that they have access to capital. We need to make sure that they have access to capital from within Wisconsin, because if they're getting capital from the coast are going to say, you need to come here and do your business here. And so that's why it's critical that we also start to really think in Wisconsin about investing in ourselves and investing in our companies so that they will stay here. And so one of the conversations that we're having at WEDC is looking for resources to make sure that our entrepreneurs are getting the capital that they need to stay here.
Thanks, Missy. Over to you, Stephanie.
So as the vaccine rolls out, the pandemic is not over, and we're also in a new year. So I'm wondering what WEDC, if you can preview maybe or give us a little taste of what's to come this year in terms of pandemic relief. Are you guys planning to launch more grants or other initiatives?
It's a great question, Stephanie. And one of the things that I'm challenging myself and the team is to think broadly about all the possible things that might happen. As the budget comes through the budget process, will there be additional resources that we need to deploy to Wisconsin's communities or businesses? If there is additional federal assistance, now we have a single party Congress and presidency. Does that mean that there might be a potential for an infrastructure bill or something around a climate change bill? And if there are resources for Wisconsin's businesses, we need to be proactively thinking about how those are going to get deployed. And so it's actually a real challenge for us to be thinking as broadly as possible, because, if you look at the CARES Act funding in 2020, that was legitimately trying to move those dollars out in a relief way as quickly as possible. And our job now is, if there are additional funds, whether federal or state, that we do that in a really strategic way. And so right now we're challenging ourselves to think as broadly as possible, so that when the time comes, we've got different scenarios and we can act on those different scenarios.
Oh, no, I was muted. Thank you for that. And Ricardo, I'm passing it on to you.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. And thank you to Nick for having some diversity in your questions. I am the broken record. So Secretary Hughes, can you explain a little bit more about how Foxconn is currently out of compliance with the current contract? Is it just because of job creation, or is it because they're not making what they said that they would make? Can you help me clarify that a little bit more?
Yeah, and I'm gonna take advantage of having the little yellow box around me to say, I know we're teasing each other about the Foxconn questions, but it's Foxconn is an incredibly big project and it's important. And so Ricardo, asking your questions completely makes sense. It's my goal to make sure that the rest of Wisconsin knows that WEDC is working for all of them and all of their businesses and all of their communities. Because if there's a community out there that has a killer idea and doesn't have the resources, I want them to be like, oh, I can maybe go talk to WEDC about that. And so I'm trying to make sure that folks know that we're here working for them. So it doesn't have anything to do with you or your questions, just fun teasing you. So with regard to our determination about Foxconn, It is based on a very highly engineered contract. This is a $3 billion contract, and every word and clause in that contract is important and key. And the meeting of the minds and the way that contract was written was around the concept of building a massive factory that would have 13,000 jobs and would then have ripple effects on our supply chain throughout the rest of the state. And the incentives that were offered as part of that contract were all centered around that concept of this massive factory. So this was a determination made based on Foxconn not building that factory. The critical part of the contract was the concept that they were going to build this factory. It's pretty straightforward. And so, we reached the determination that they were not building that factory and therefore not eligible for credits.
So did job creation also have any sort of factor in that formula?
The job creation was a indicator that the factory was not being built. In order to build a factory like that, you have to employ thousands upon thousands of people. And so, that was part of the consideration, but the determination is not that they didn't meet the jobs, therefore they're not eligible. The determination was they're not building this factory and manufacturing these products as per the contract, and therefore they're ineligible for the credits.
All right, Nick, take it away.
Miss, you talked my last question about the startups and entrepreneurs who have these high growth, fast growing companies, incentives for them to stay. Is there talk about allocating more funds towards a statewide investment fund that will invest in these companies around the state to help them with their growth and also get a return for the state?
Yeah, we have the Badger Fund of Funds that was created a few years ago, which is, one idea for how you do this. We're also looking at other states and what they've done. If you look at the Midwest, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana have all created funds that sometimes are completely private, sometimes there's a government role, a public role. And so we're trying to look at those different opportunities and think about what would most serve the Wisconsin entrepreneurs, given the dynamics that we have in Wisconsin. And then perhaps coming forward with an idea around that, and certainly working with others to see what they're doing and what they're thinking about. There are private conversations, happening, and how can we leverage those conversations? So there's definitely, I think a recognition that Wisconsin can invest in itself, should invest in itself, and that Wisconsin's entrepreneurs deserve that.
Thanks, Missy. I see Corey has joined us.
I am back, but Stephanie, if you want to ask another question, please go ahead.
I was interested in what the audience had to say, actually.
Okay, great. There are two questions. I'll ask them now. One is from somebody who lives in Madison, who asks, after the Black Lives Matter protests last summer and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the retail and entertainment district in downtown Madison is in rough shape. It's difficult to admit, but in a rather depressing view. Are there any plans to provide support to the State Street or Capitol Square areas?
I had a chance. I live in southwestern Wisconsin, and I had a chance to go down with my kids and my husband. We often in the past would go down to State Street and get Ethiopian food and enjoy walking around. And it was hard. It was really hard to see. The stores that I went into, my husband has a favorite store. We went in and we were standing there and he turned to me and he said, "Missy, tell them about the We're All In grants." And, we talked about that. I talked about that with the business owner, And then my husband bought something, and the business owner was so grateful for shopping, our shopping and our shopping local. And, you know, I think throughout this, it's just been such a balance of public health and economic health. And that's why I was probably tiresomely on the public news trying to talk about our online marketplace to make sure that folks knew about that and understood about that. Going forward, you know, I feel like this natural disaster, hopefully, you know, the floodwaters are receding. And Stephanie has asked me questions about, you know, what's the real devastation like? And when we see that, I think we'll be able to have a better understanding of how to deploy resources to help businesses recover, and really recover, not just relief, not just make it through the next month, but we need to continue to have these conversations. And, you know, I think that's a city conversation, that's a state conversation, and that's a national conversation.
Okay. What prospects or potential do you see for renewable energy companies in the future?
You cut out right at the end. You said what prospects for renewable energy, and then I lost you.
Yeah, just for renewable energy companies in the future.
Yeah, I think that Wisconsin needs to really look to renewable energy as such an opportunity. If you know, if you look at a state that doesn't have the manufacturing base for like Wisconsin does, and you think about how does that state engage with this renewable energy conversation, right? I can't imagine. I'm not going to even name a state but Wisconsin has such a manufacturing power. And how do we turn that power into renewable energy? In that, how do we support the renewable energy economy that is coming? We're going to have electric cars. We're going to have a transition from you know, oil burning boilers in homes to more efficient heat providing in homes. And so how, as a manufacturing state, do we take advantage of that? And you know, set aside the climate change conversation, set aside green versus blue energy or whatever. This is an opportunity for Wisconsin's businesses to meet a market that is coming at them. And so how at WEDC can we help with that? How can we open manufacturers' eyes? How do we get entrepreneurs coming with ideas for our manufacturers to take advantage of that? I think there's so much opportunity there, and I'm excited about that. And I'm excited to get through the pandemic and start having those conversations and really, you know, vibrantly thinking about that.
Okay, there are a couple of Foxconn questions. So what about that dome? Some people have suggested it was a prop built for President Trump. Is there any truth to that? What's happening with that dome?
You know, the dome. My conversations with Foxconn have been that it is a data center, but I don't have any opinion on the dome.
Okay, and you know, it's a lot of land down there, and there were homes that were cleared for the land. And if Foxconn doesn't do everything that they've talked about, what will happen to all of that land? Can other business be built there? I mean, can it be developed? It's prime real estate.
Not only is it prime real estate, it has had the infrastructure brought to it now that we have to take advantage of that. And one of the, you know, the conversations that we have with the locals who are really, you know, tactically very knowledgeable about that property is what can we do to help develop that? We want to make sure that land gets developed. Nobody wants to see it sit there after, you know, having moved homes off of it. It's incumbent on us to make it a successful piece of property and well utilized. The highest for that.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
That's
when could WEDC move on that or market that property?
You know, it's still part of the Foxconn project, and so you know, I think that's all part of the conversations that are being had. And again, you know, keeping the locals in mind and making sure that the local communities are successful there. I think that's a key part of it.
Okay. Have you toured the site recently or gotten into those buildings?
Recently is no longer something that really clocks for any of us, I think. I was there in the fall. I think it was, I apologize. I think it was probably October or so that I had a chance to go down there and see what was happening.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming today and sharing everything that you are doing and WEDC is doing. And thank you to our journalist panel. And I want to again thank our event sponsors, Spectrum One News, WISPolitics.com. WISP partners with the Press Club for this luncheon as part of its ongoing series in Milwaukee, sponsored by UW Milwaukee, Wisconsin Academy of Global Education and Training, 1125 at Pabst, Milwaukee Police Association, the Firm Consulting, Medical College of Wisconsin, and Spectrum. If you enjoyed this program today and are interested in supporting the Press Club's programming and events, please consider donating to the club's endowment. You can do that at our website. Also, if you're interested in joining the Press Club, you can do that at our website too. We've got a couple of upcoming events. On Thursday, WISP Politics will be holding a virtual event just like this one, featuring Congressman Tiffany and Fitzgerald. And then on November 21st, we're going to do something a little bit different and fun. We're going to have a Milwaukee Media Smackdown virtual trivia event. So everyone register and let's have some trivia and virtual beers together. So thank you again, Secretary Hughes. Thank you to our media panel and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.